Today's a monumental day, not necessarily for Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, or Terry Rozier, three NBA-affiliated folks, one a head coach, that have been arrested in a wide-sweeping gambling case. The FBI's Kash Patel, well, he and a bunch of others stood in front of the media today, and we're going to react to it.
Good morning. Today we are here in New York to announce a historic arrest across a wide-sweeping criminal enterprise that envelops both the NBA and La Cosa Nostra. The men and women up here standing with me represent a small portion of the leadership team that brought profound justice in an era that needed it more than any. I'll just highlight some of the details in the case and the FBI work, and then you'll hear from the others. But as you now know, individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today, former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing. Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Cosa Nostra to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families.
This is the NBA's biggest nightmare. For years, you have heard from Tim Donaghy, disgraced official who went to jail because he was fixing games. Oh, man, widespread mafia involvement. Two things. One, I thought the mafia was done after John Gotti, Sammy the Bull, and others ratted it out. Apparently, that's not the case. Back to the NBA. This is their biggest nightmare. When underworld figures, underground figures, and these are the five biggest families in the history of the American Italian mafia, when they're involved in your sport in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't matter whether it's fixing games or setting Chauncey Billups up as the face of illegal poker games, this is the biggest nightmare you have. Why? Because it cuts at the credibility of the league. It cuts at the credibility of the day-to-day games. This is massive. It's one thing to have a guy say, all right, I'm going to take myself out of a game. We're going to hit some over-unders. Fine, that's terrible. You get rid of the guy, that cuts at the credibility. But this is something every single sports operation, legit sports operation, fears. Influence, involvement with La Cosa Nostra, the Italian mafia. Massive, massive day right there, and the biggest nightmare any sports league could have.
The charges and the arrests that were taken down across this country range from wire fraud, money laundering, extortion, robbery, illegal gambling. This FBI will leave no room for any perpetrator of crime across this country. You hear a lot about our work of defending the homeland and crushing violent crime. Well, this work is also representative of a colossal portion of the FBI's mandate to keep America safe and to keep our entertainment industry fair and secure. The men and women that are standing up here today worked tireless hours, days, months, and years. And the fraud is mind-boggling. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. It's not even millions of dollars. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in fraud and theft and robbery across a multi-year investigation. And we could not have done it without our interagency partners that are before us today. The NYPD, HSI, and teams of law enforcement officials from around the country made this day possible.
The reason there's a team is there's two separate things here. There's two separate entities here. There is the NBA Terry Rozier fixing games, and you'll hear about that coming up in a minute. And then there is the poker games associated with La Cosa Nostra. That's what Kash Patel is talking about. Sure, it takes a team to take down one element of this. It does, no question about it. However, it takes a massive, massive group to take down two separate gambling entities, and frankly, they are tied together because of the involvement of the NBA players, current player and coach. That's how they are connected, but they're totally separate. They're totally separate operations. The basketball one was called Nothing But Net, Operation Nothing But Net, and I believe the poker one was called Operation Royal Flush. Now, Understand, that's why there's so many people up there. This is not just a rigged poker game involving La Cosa Nostra. This is also on-court fixing of games prop bets.
This kind of justice, sweeping justice into the halls of the United States courtrooms where our brave United States attorney has led this prosecution. It takes courageous prosecutors to stand before you and say, we will not allow this kind of illicit activity to happen, not only at the national sporting level, but also where it hides in La Cosa Nostra. And when these two collided together, they perpetrated a fraud that is historic in terms of not just money, but the scheme and the deceit that they utilize to steal and swindle people from money, to include crypto fraud. This is an operation that showcases to you that under President Trump's administration, there is no room for any type of criminal behavior, be it on the world's largest stage or in the back rooms of tiny parlors where card games are being played. We are proud to stand here today with the men and women of the FBI and this legal team. And to the United States Attorney, I just want to thank you personally for taking the time to display the work that the media is about to hear about today in detail. As I said, it does take courageous prosecutors, but it takes a courageous United States Attorney to bring this case, because we are going to take heat for it. But we don't shy away in this administration. We don't say no. What we do is we bring the results across the finish line. We bring them to the public. We bring you accountability. And yes, they will have their day in court, and you will hear the evidence through the court system exclusively. We will not deny anyone of due process. And that's the brilliance of this system. That's the brilliance of this administration. Everyone will be held to account. So with that, I turn it over to United States Attorney Nocella. Thank you.
That was a bit of a promotion for himself and for the FBI. And you could tell Kash Patel is very, very excited about this. But as we move it forward, and you're going to hear certain things, understand this. Chauncey Billups earned over $106 million in his NBA career. Chauncey Billups also, post-NBA career, signed on with ESPN, where I guarantee you he made another $500,000 a year. He's making reportedly $4.75 million as the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers. Think about that just for a second. So I'm interested in the backstory. Terry Rozier this year, the player in question with the Miami Heat, was scheduled to make about $26 million this year. So as you hear these charges and you hear what's going on here, keep that in mind, because it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it begs the question, why? Why would Billups get involved with this? Why would Rozier get involved in this? Actually, you're going to hear that the numbers that Rozier we're talking about aren't that significant when you compare it against a $26 million salary.
To be clear, we're announcing today indictments in two major cases, both involving fraud. One involves sports betting, and the other involves illegal gambling, very specifically rigged poker games. The first indictment involves 6 defendants who are alleged to have participated in one of the most brazen sports corruption schemes since online sports betting became widely legalized in the United States. This scheme is an insider sports betting conspiracy that exploited confidential information about National Basketball Association athletes and teams. The second indictment involves 31 defendants alleged to have participated in a nationwide scheme to rig illegal poker games. These defendants, which include former professional athletes, used high-tech cheating technology to steal millions of dollars from victims in underground poker games that were secretly fixed. The games in the New York area were backed by the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families of La Cosa Nostra. While the cases are separate, there are 3 overlapping defendants charged in both cases: Damon Jones, Eric Ernest, and Shane Hennon.
Damon Jones is a longtime NBA player. In fact, he was for many years LeBron James's running mate, both in Miami and in Cleveland. He's a current assistant coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So there's your problem if you're the NBA. When you are going to come out And you are going to say those 5 crime families were funding games that an NBA assistant coach, longtime player, very well-known NBA player. In fact, he worked at ESPN as well for a bit. When you're going to come out and connect an NBA player with fixing games or being involved in poker or any type of gambling operation, that, ladies and gentlemen, is every sports book's worst nightmare. If you know anything about La Cosa Nostra, the Mafia, I've read a ton of books on this. They get their tentacles in, and then it spreads. And then it becomes here and there and everywhere. That's the nightmare right there.
And the defendants are presumed innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law. But my message to the defendants who've been rounded up today is this. Your winning streak has ended. Your luck has run out. Violating the law is a losing proposition, and you can bet on that. First, I would like to talk about United States versus Ernest, the NBA basketball gambling case. The defendants in this case are Eric Ernest, Marvez Farley, Shane Hennon, De Niro Laster, Damon Jones, a former NBA player and coach, and Terry Rozier, a current NBA player. Other co-conspirators were previously charged for their roles in the scheme, including former NBA player Jonte Porter. Between December 2022 and March 2024, these defendants perpetrated a scheme to defraud by betting on inside, non-public information about NBA athletes and teams. The non-public information included when specific players would be sitting out future games or when they would pull themselves out early for purported injuries or illnesses.
Here's what he's saying there. It's something called a prop bet. A prop bet you can make on any gambling site, DraftKings, whatever your gambling site is, and it is not the spread, meaning it's not Indiana against Washington. It is Terry Rozier in this case. How many points? How many assists? Over, under. 9.5 points, let's say. Over, under. 3 assists. Over, under. 4 rebounds. That kind of thing. And what they're saying here is that Rozier, the player, and these other defendants conspired with Rozier's help to win money based on Rozier rigging it. He sat out. He went out. He didn't play. He left games.
They also misused information obtained through long-standing friendships that they had with NBA players and coaches. And in at least one instance, they got their information by threatening a current player, Porter, because of his pre-existing gambling debts. Defendants used this non-public information to place hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent bets, mostly in the form of prop bets on individual player performance. The bets were placed through online sports books and also in person at casinos. The defendants relied on a network of straw bettors to place the maximum amount of bets to increase their potential profits. Most of these bets succeeded, and the intended losses were in the millions of dollars. The defendants then laundered their illegal winnings in various ways: peer-to-peer platforms, bank wires, and simple cash exchanges. The indictment details specific examples where the defendants profited from illegal gambling and illegal betting on various NBA games about the performance of players on, among other things, the Charlotte Hornets, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Toronto Rangers. Each defendant in the NBA basketball gambling case has been charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Now, I would like to turn to the other case, United States versus Aiello.
Well, first off, it's the Toronto Raptors. This gentleman got it wrong, but that's Rozier's deal. That's Rozier, and that is what he did. Allegedly, and it's later on in this, $200,000 was bet, won, and split up at Rozier's house post-game when he took himself allegedly out of a game 9 minutes into the game. He and the co-conspirators decided it was a good idea. They made the bets. They knew Rozier was going to do this. He took himself out. They went to Rozier's house and divided up $200,000. How silly is this? $200,000 may be a lot to us, but $200,000 to a guy making $26 million a year? And he's made over $140 million in his career. This is lunacy. This is stupidity. This is mind-boggling stupid. That's the Rozier side.
Beginning as early as 2019, the defendants in this case orchestrated a scheme to use wireless cheating technology to run rigged poker games across the United States, including in the Hamptons, Las Vegas, Miami, and Manhattan. The scheme targeted victims known as, quote, fish, who were often lured to participate in these rigged games by the chance to play alongside former professional athletes who were known as, quote, face cards. The so-called face cards included the defendant Chauncey Billups, who at the time of the scheme was a former NBA player and is currently the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, and also Damon
Please.
Jones.
What that means, and you just heard Damon Jones' name in there as well, is that Billups, through his connections in the NBA, and we already know the salaries of the NBA, was a face card, which meant he was the guy that was going to bring in players, whales, they call them in Vegas, people with a lot of money. Where this gets interesting is the cheating involved, which you're going to hear about. You're going to hear about cameras under the table. You're going to hear about cards being marked. You're going to hear about all this crazy stuff. But Billups and Jones were used, again, based on their connections, to bring in more players. Go ahead.
A former NBA player and coach. What the victims, the fish, didn't know is that everybody else at the poker game, from the dealer to the players, including the face cards, were in on the scam. Once the game was underway, the defendants fleeced the victims out of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per game. The defendants used a variety of very sophisticated cheating technologies, some of which were provided by other defendants in exchange for a share of the profits from the scheme. For example, they used off-the-shelf shuffling machines that had been secretly altered in order to read the cards in the deck, predict which player at the table had the best poker hand, and relay that information to an off-site operator.
So now you're hearing about how they cheated. And how they cheated was a number of ways we just mentioned, but one was an illegal shuffling deck. My God, the technology is mind-boggling. So Billups, Jones, others would bring players in, and the game was rigged. The game was rigged by cameras. The game was rigged by these illegal shuffling decks.
The off-site operator sent the information via cell phone back to a co-conspirator at the table, and that person at the table was known as the quarterback. The quarterback then signaled secretly the information he had received from others to others at the table, and together they used that information in order to win their games and to cheat the victims. Defendants used other cheating technologies such as poker chip tray analyzers, which is a poker chip tray that secretly reads cards using a hidden camera, special contact lenses or eyeglasses that could read pre-marked cards, and an X-ray table that could read cards face down on the table. What you see depicted on screen right now is an example of the X-ray table that reveals the cards. Although they are face down on the table, they can be read because of the X-ray technology. The mafia, specifically members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese organized crime families, had pre-existing control over non-rigged, illegal poker games around New York City. As a result, they also became involved in the rigged poker games, helping to organize the games and taking a cut of the proceedings, and working to enforce the collection of debts. The defendants laundered their proceeds, including through cash exchanges, the use of multiple shell companies, and through cryptocurrency transfers.
Now what they're telling you is they're telling you that, you know what, the mafia was involved in funding these games. Here's going to be the problem. Did Billups know the mafia was funding it? Did Billups know these games were rigged? Did Damon Jones know these games were rigged? You know, a lot of people are, and myself included, are saying, hey, wait a second, wake me up when somebody gets convicted. That's going to be interesting because we already know the defense. Rozier's people have said we've worked with the feds for years, whatever. They're basically they betrayed us in certain ways. But what are Billups' attorney and what are Jones's attorneys going to say? They're going to say, we didn't know anything about this. It was a poker game. Guys showed up. Pro athletes play poker all the time. That's what's going to come out of this from Billups' people and from Jones's people.
Some of the defendants and their co-conspirators also committed acts of violence, including the gunpoint robbery of a person in order to obtain a rigged shuffling machine, and extortions that were perpetrated against victims in order to ensure that they repaid their gambling debts.
Let's think about what you got. You got a defendant pointing a gun at somebody to get the machine. You got the mob, and this is earlier, John Tay Porter, you heard that name earlier. That guy was being threatened because of his gambling losses. Again, whatever else comes out of this, let's just keep it to sports for just a second. Nightmare. Adam Silver, this is a nightmare. They have a PR team that I'm sure they're paying millions upon millions of dollars in place right now to figure this out, how to handle this. Because it isn't, I promise you, it isn't just one or two guys when the mafia is involved. It's just not. Tim Donaghy, going back, the disgraced official who told the world that gambling was all over the place, from referees to players to coaches, he was being threatened because of gambling losses. Again, the worst nightmare, the biggest PR problem. We're going to see. But anyway, this is the biggest thing for the NBA. The fact that La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, is involved.
Other defendants have been charged with crimes including illegal gambling, money laundering, Hobbs Act robbery, and extortions. This case demonstrates our office's unrelenting commitment to fighting the scourge of organized crime in whatever form it takes.
Okay, now here's how a coach looks at this. It was a few years ago where the FBI, the Southern District of New York, got up and said, we have your game plan, coaches, and there's going to be arrests. There were a couple. But nothing really happened. And a lot of coaches, and probably the NBA and a lot of NCAA, a lot of people are saying, is this that kind of same thing? Big grandiose, a lot of people, a lot of important people, a lot of powerful people standing up in front of the nation talking about a sports operation. Back then it was NCAA basketball. Now it's NBA. Let's see what happens. Let's see if anybody gets convicted. Let's see if anybody goes to jail. That's what the public's looking at. And here's the last thing relative to the NBA. The sport that most people believe to be fixed is the NBA. I mean, this isn't new. This has been going on for years. Even when I was a kid, people thought the NBA was fixed. I don't know exactly the history of it. I just know that it continues to this day. This is just simply another black eye. It just is. You can come back from this. You can come back from it very quickly. How? If you're the NBA, you just keep going. You don't worry about it. You put out statements. You get to make sure everybody's involved, everybody knows, and you move it along. But this is going to be fascinating. And to people like me that have seen this before, I'm waiting for a couple things. One, anybody going to be convicted? Two, anybody going to jail? That's what we're looking for. Stay tuned. It's going to get spicy, I think.